Welcome to Mindfulness Unscripted. I'm your host, Jon Orsini. Take a big breath in. Here we go.
Did my 200-hour at SkyTing Yoga in New York, and then I did an apprenticeship with a yoga teacher that summer, and she's a genius and studies Katona yoga and just is amazing, and we really dived into that yoga lineage. And then I did a mentorship with the founder of SkyTing, Chrissy Jones, all that fall of 2023, which was amazing and super she gave me really practical, specific advice, which I found so helpful, especially around my voice and how I speak in class, which has been really useful. Even though I'm not teaching asana, like having that feedback about how I'm projecting my voice and speaking to a group has been really helpful in breathwork. I think when I'm nervous, I tend to get really monotone, and just like when I'm talking around people, just day to day, like I can be a little flat, and I think when I'm a little nervous, I also even sound like I don't want to be there. Some feedback she gave me that she's like, are you having fun? Like, did you like teaching that? And I was like, I mean, I'm terrified and nervous of you, like terrified of you and afraid to like look stupid, so not really. But that feedback, she was like, well, you should maybe like work on like trying to sound like you're having fun, you know. So when I've been teaching breathwork, that's in the back of my mind, like how can we say all this stuff and make it sound kind of light and loving and approachable. So, and I find the voice and then even after jumping forward to David's training, the breathwork training, I find like all of the stuff around like your throat chakra and like your voice and expression so interesting, and actually has a lot to do with that. But then I went to Portugal for a 300-hour advanced yoga teacher training with the Sacred Fig, which was incredible. Then I came home, took a break. I had done some breathwork journeys with my teachers at SkyTing and Sacred Fig, and I had always really amazing experiences. And my teacher Anton, you know Anton, was saying that he was going to go do this training with David, and I was like, wait, I want to do that. So then I did.
So it's a couple things that stood out to me. One is how you said, Chrissy, did you say at SkyTing? How it mentioned the voice thing. So like a couple things about that are interesting is the idea that, like you said, how it sounds like that you don't, when you're nervous, you get monotone and it sounds like you don't want to be there. When of course, like I know you well, like of course you want to be there, like you're excited to be there, but that the nerves kind of make your voice. So it's so interesting how sometimes we perceive other people or be like, oh, you know, like in this case, oh, that teacher didn't want to be there. It's like, no, she wanted to be there so much so, like, and it was actually nerves, and how like we can project our point of view on other people when we really don't know what's going on with each other. Right?
Exactly.
So, or similar, like when we're saying with the breathing, like sometimes there's people in the sessions and it seems like they're not really breathing even after like the demonstration of the process. And it might seem like, oh, do they not like me, or do they not want to be here, or they not whatever. But it's actually like, it might actually just be coming from a deep sense of control or fear around feeling, you know? It's super interesting. And again, I guess it's almost a cliche to be like, we don't know what other people are feeling, so try not to take things personally. But like, really, these are a couple interesting examples, I think.
No, I find that so reassuring, honestly, because I think a lot of my anxiety has been about projecting ideas of what other people are thinking about me or like situations, and trying to control. It is a control thing. And so I find that when I'm wrong about something or wrong about what someone was thinking, it's such a relief, because I was like, oh yeah, my brain is kind of crazy, like so creative that I thought that that person hated me, but it's totally, they had something completely apart from me going on. But yeah, it's funny you say that. Also, like the thing is that sometimes I get in my head about it with classes, and it's when you show up to the room and you're like leading the group, and then you just see like blank stares, and you're like, oh god.
Sometimes sometimes I incorporate some movement and stuff because, again, like with the different trainings, and you never want to do something outside your scope of practice, but there are like
Totally.
simple ways because it is. Sometimes I walk into a room to guide something, and it's just like right off the bat, people are raising hands, being like, "I'm so curious about this," or "Can we try that?"
Mhm.
or like, "What's this going to be about?" And like it's very open. And then other
Mhm.
times, like you're saying, you walk into a room that's just like quiet, and it's like, but and there's this sense of trepidation, even, or who just
Mhm.
what different every time, and like so sometimes I'll just get people to just like, and I'll just like lead by being silly, just being like, okay, get up,
Yeah,
blah blah blah, like make weird sounds or whatever,
exactly.
because sometimes all it takes is a sense of permission, you know,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
which I guess related to the voice thing too. I noticed, like I had been an actor for a long time, and something I noticed from doing theater, like around New York and wherever for a long time, like if whenever I was in a comedy, it'd be interesting because audiences are always different. They're always different.
Mhm.
And so it'd be interesting because sometimes there'd be nights where like the audience was a little quieter or a little timid. And for a
Mhm.
comedy, that's tough. Like you're on the stage, the more the
Mhm.
audience is like warm and into it, right? Like why stand-up comedians have like a warm-up act in some cases.
Yeah.
And so what I found interesting is when there'd be one person in the audience who was willing to laugh, just like genuinely laugh. All it takes is one person that's genuinely willing to laugh and not worry if anybody thought they were weird because they were laughing more than everyone else. That
Mhm.
one person sends out a wave of permission to everyone else in that audience to laugh as well.
Mhm.
And so I noticed that over the years of being on stage, and so how much it applies to these breathwork groups, and how, for instance, if there's one person in the breathwork group that's willing to breathe deep and full, and then they're
Mhm.
willing to, whether it's like make some sounds or just feel fully, like even their willingness to feel
Yeah.
fully, that radiates through the room,
Mhm.
and so this is all to say I realize that in all aspects of my life I try to be that person. Like I'll even
Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah, like I'll even try to think of myself as like like the sacrificial lamb or something. Like so when I'm in people's sessions, like when I've gone to your sessions and stuff like that, like sometimes like I'll notice a room is a little timid and I'll be like, "All right, well,
Mhm.
I'll speak first," or like, "All right, well,
Yeah.
it's like anyways, and it's been a journey because I used to be such a shy kid and whatever. So this is like the opposite of being like, "All right, I'll be the one to put myself out there," because it gives everyone else permission, you know?
Yeah. I have so many thoughts. Um, yeah, my boyfriend Ian, who I mentioned, comes to like all the my classes now, and I love when he does because I feel like he's such an anchor for the room, and he's not afraid to yell really loud when I encourage people to yell, and I really appreciate him being in the groups. And like my other friend, I think you met Lizzie. She comes to a lot of my groups, and she's always the first to share at the end. Or I always really appreciate that because I really love that moment of regrouping and like letting people talk about what they what came up for them or questions they might have.
Yeah.
Wait, there's something else I was gonna say. Well, I want to circle back at some point to like how you navigate developing your sense of intuition, which this David Elliott training was all about, was very much about
Mm.
developing intuition and not reading people's minds or trying to read people's minds in a way that like is just not right. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, I don't know if this is a segue too, but that sense of permission, like
Yeah.
that feeling of permission, just allow things to be more open and free flowing.
Yeah.
So whether that's like we give by something we're doing, we're giving permission to others to feel more open. And then there's also giving permission to ourselves. And so what's so interesting about intuition, and again, like I guess coming from a very rational place, because like it's such a good question that you're asking me and that I have for you. And like it's such a good question, like how do we develop that intuition? Because it's not something that's like my mind, especially when I get um uncomfortable in any form or fashion, my mind gets very, very rational, like hard rational, just being like, okay, this plus this equals this, and that then I can like rest on that. But
Mm.
but with breath or with really anything, there's always art and science. Like
Mm-hmm.
with anything, like even, I'll say like with acting again, like there's a way to interpret a script that's a little more, I guess you could say, quote unquote, scientific in terms of how the beats of the story work, or how to structure a scene. And as an
Mm-hmm.
actor, you can learn that. You can learn the science of it. But then there's the art of living in it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess with intuition, what's so interesting is there's a certain sense of the science of it, right? Like when you breathe in a certain way, there's a shift in brain chemistry that happens after a certain period of time. But that's all with the caveat that the person who's breathing feels held in the container, because it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like with, I don't know, like have you ever been hypnotized?
No.
Me neither. But I have this sense.
I've been tried, like someone tried to. I
Mm.
went to a hypnotherapist on Zoom. It didn't really work. I didn't believe her.
Okay, so that's where I'm at, right? That's what I'm at.
Yeah.
Like that there's probably some degree of science to these things, but there's the
Mm-hmm.
art of it too, which is allows someone to feel safe and allows someone to give over to it. So in terms of intuition, it's like giving ourselves that permission to know that there's a science aspect, but that there's an art aspect to intuition that you actually can't really define with anything, and there's no
Mm-hmm.
like A, B, C step to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way, I mean, that's a long preface to say, the main primary way that I've developed intuition is time in nature, without a doubt, you know?
So true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think it just teaches you time in nature, teaches you how to listen on a different level and teaches you how to feel on a different level. And I feel like there was something that David said in the training that was sort of just like, just trust it, what's coming up for you. And because there's no real way you're ever going to get full confirmation. Like if you're sitting near a rock, um, I won't even go. I have a whole story about rocks, which there was some aspect that I mentioned in the training, but if you're sitting in a section of forest, let's put it this way, if you're sitting in a section of forest and you just get this feeling of sadness, and it's like, well, maybe the forest feels sad because there's a lot of pressure on it. Like maybe these trees are not doing so well right now because it's hasn't rained enough or something like that.
Mm.
Like it just gets you more really, I don't know if intuition is just heightened sensitivity in a sense.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm
Yeah.
getting at.
I get that. I mean, I don't spend nearly enough time in nature as I would like to, or would I know I should. But coming back from the training with David, I just always notice like the squirrels on my street now. And I feel like I have this like it sounds so silly, but I feel like I have this like invisible language with them now where like we make eye contact and we stare at each other for a really long time. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna have a staring contest with the squirrels now. And they're like taunting me and like making fun of me. And I really enjoy it.
Well, there's
Even though it's so menial, I feel like it adds like texture and just like mysticism to my life and like walks with my dogs down the street.
totally. And there's just in that whole sense of permission, it's
Yeah.
even if it's just your creative self.
Yeah, it's creativity.
Yeah, you know what? You know how sometimes I think of it. We do a lot of work like this at Kripalu, especially
Hmm.
in the outdoor realm, and which is actually the main thing that brought me there. Which again is a whole other thing. But
Hmm.
we do so much of this work at Kripalu, and I've learned so much from the guides there. And I've had these different thoughts. Like sometimes when we guide these meditative hikes,
Hmm.
we'll say, we'll do this practice called befriending a tree. And so we'll invite everyone in the group, ourselves included, to go sit near a tree and just see if there's a message that comes through, right? Just get to
Hmm.
know the tree. And it's not even like, okay, you're specifically there for the tree to talk to you,
Yeah.
that means, right? But that you're just sitting with the tree, you're like touching the bark, you're getting the smells, like you're just becoming more sensitive to the tree.
Hmm.
And far more often than not, people will come back to the group for the integration, the talking circle afterwards. Far more often than not, people will come back and say that the tree communicated with them in some form or fashion.
Hmm.
So the way that I think of it is whether the tree literally communicated with the person, which depending on a belief system is absolutely viable because trees do have consciousness, they share resources, right? There's all this emerging hard science about that, right?
Hmm.
But even for people who are highly skeptical, right, or highly just like, if I can't see it, it's not real. If I can't hear it, nothing was said, right? Like even people like
Hmm.
that, The way that I think of it is when you sit down and you open up that space of sensitivity to just, again, notice the bark, notice the smells. Even if by creating that space, whether it's the tree that literally communicates with you, or because you created enough space for your own unconscious to bubble up and share something with you. So maybe it came from the deeper recesses of your own mind. Maybe it came from the tree or from the earth or the land. And no matter what your belief system is, at the end of the day, does it really matter the belief system if you get a beautiful message out of it, right?
No, yeah, exactly.
Or if you get a point of clarity out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So whether the squirrels are telling you things or not, right? Your sensitivity and connection to them is telling you something. And if that something makes you laugh, makes you smile, makes you reveal something to you about yourself, or to you in terms of a depth of feeling, a depth of connection, to get to know your neighborhood of which the squirrels are a part, like what, it's all upside, you know?
Absolutely. It's so true.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I can be very serious, so it's nice to have those moments of like more levity and feeling like childlike.
That's it. Yeah, the playfulness and
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. You
Yeah.
know, actually, something that I think applies to breath work a lot too is I was listening to I love Dr. Peter Levine. He's a trauma doc,
Oh,
trauma psychologist.
yeah, I don't know him.
Yeah, he's beautiful. He has a book called Waking the Tiger.
Mm.
So in it so much, I mean, the thing is, like, when you read his stuff and like look into his stuff, you'll find so much you already know from the breathwork training and like
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity to through all the yoga training and everything. He talks about how curiosity and play. So I'm
Yeah.
just trying to think. I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but it's some broad stroking. How there's the trauma brain,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the first thing that happens when we're traumatized and when we dissociate from our bodies and stuff is that we lose a sense of play, curiosity, and exploration, right? Like we need to feel to some degree of safety in order to feel playful.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in like your connection with the squirrels or like deepening connection with intuition, there's part of the brain, especially I think as we get older and more, whatever, jaded, I don't know what, cynical, who knows. Certainly speaking for myself here. There's a sense of not trusting intuition because we think it's silly or we think it's like a flight of fancy or like that it's not concrete enough. But
Mm-hmm.
even by engaging with that exploratory sense of intuition, is a sense of play, is a sense of curiosity. And play
Mm-hmm.
and curiosity are the antithesis of the trauma brain. The brain that feels like I need to stay in control. It's too dangerous to let myself be playful. It's too dangerous to let myself be curious. Like, so what Peter Levine is saying is that they can't exist simultaneously.
That's amazing. I want to read that. Yeah, so much of this stuff overlaps if you read different literature or study with different teachers from various lineages and backgrounds all over the world. It all like really overlaps. When you were talking about something earlier, what were you sharing about? It reminded me of just the you know anything that we can't be like seen or heard or felt like in our immediate whatever um isn't real. And it just made me think of like this book I'm reading right now called The Five Spirits, and it's about traditional Chinese medicine, which I've also been really interested in recently in the last 10 months or so. um but just about how young a lot of the traditional Chinese medicine and Jungian psychology overlaps in many ways, but the Chinese and the ancient Chinese believed that there is way, 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 way more. Like it's not just a horizontal plane. There's a vertical plane in which consciousness there's in which I don't know. I'm gonna butcher this so badly because it is a little bit above my like understanding, but that there's just so much that we can't consciously understand and that we will never understand, but that like we are a part of, and therefore that is like the Tao or whatever, which I find interesting. I don't know. I've always been very interested in philosophy and psychology and mysticism, and a little bit less interested in the science. But
Hmm.
as I've become more interested in traditional Chinese medicine and breathwork and teaching these modalities, I feel like the science is really important. And that now I'm interested in the science because I'm interested in what I'm doing. I'm not just like in school in a biology classroom, like not
Yeah.
really sure why I'm there. Because I think about it now, I really want to go to acupuncture school. And it's like a huge commitment. I think I have to do it for at least 4 years, and I have to learn every bone in the body and take biology and biology too, and physiology and anatomy. And I was a little worried about that, but I was like, you know what, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Well, totally. I think like curiosity is everything, right? You just
Yeah.
keep if when you're curious about something, that could carry you for your entire life. Like I just saw this thing recently, and this woman was saying something about like people put all this emphasis on passion. But of course, as we all know, passion can ebb and flow. But curiosity, like if you're continually curious about the human body or about like the emotional and energetic body, that'll carry you for a lifetime. So we can,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so interesting you say that, because one of my like lifelong struggles, especially when I was a child, was feeling like I didn't have a passion and I wasn't passionate about anything, because my parents were very passionate about one specific thing, and they always said to me, they're like, you can do whatever you want as long as you're passionate about it. And for my mom, that was horseback riding. She rode horses her entire life. She was going to go to the Olympics. She didn't go because her dad was like, you need to go to college. And then she dropped out of college, went back to riding. And then my dad was a sailor and is a sailor and a naval architect. And he went, his parents paid for him to go to 1 year of this sailing focused boarding school with the stipulation that they wouldn't pay for college. So he went to this school to sail, and then he didn't end up going to college. He just went right into boat building and sort of followed that path for his whole life. So they had very specific passions: sailing and horseback riding. And I was like, well, I don't really like horseback riding that much. There feels like there's a lot of, I think I actually really enjoyed horseback riding, but there was a lot of external pressure around it being so competitive at a very young age, and wanting to live up to how good of a horseback rider and equestrian my mom was. And then sailing, and same thing. I didn't really want to do it. So I always felt like, oh, I'm not passionate about anything. Like, what am I going to do in my life? And at I overlooked for the longest time the fact that I'm very curious. Like, I will get like a little ping, like, oh, that seems interesting, and then I will go down a rabbit hole investigating that one like thing I'm interested in, and then it takes me somewhere else.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's beautiful and it makes a lot of sense. And like,
Mm-hmm.
and again, like, different people have varying degrees. Like when you're a really inquisitive person, I feel like passion can be interesting because you're like passionate about something, but again, that it could wane or it could ebb and flow. Whereas if you're just curious, like if you're curious about the energetic body, right? That can take you down it could be acupuncture, it could be yoga, it could be breath work, but like you're always in that same realm. And it
Mm-hmm.
will always feed, like, one will always feed the other. And so it's a beautiful thing to explore.
Yeah.
And also, before I forget too, there's a acupuncturist named Aisha in New York City, because obviously I lived in New York City a long time. I'll give you her information. Uh, she is she does regular acupuncture, like in terms of the energy lines.
Yeah.
But she also does trigger point acupuncture. So it's
Oh.
almost like, yeah, it's like it'll go right into where you have knots or whatever. And again,
Yeah.
I don't know a ton. I've received a lot of acupuncture. I worked with her for a period of time. Like she was a savior to me through a period of time. Like, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
say that lightly. Like she was such an anchor, like you said, and
Mm-hmm.
her work is incredible. And so she does trigger point acupuncture. So it's like finding where you have these like energetic holds in your body that may even manifest as like a physical knot and
Yeah.
their musculature. And then she'll just like trigger it out with the needle, and it like tremors and shakes and
Oh
releases.
God.
Yeah, it's really wild. And anyway, and she's just a fantastic human being as well as acupuncturist. So I'll give you,
Yeah, I would love to meet her.
yeah, Aisha Abel.
I've been doing acupuncture for 2 years, maybe 2.5 now, and I agree. He has really changed my life.
Oh, cool.
um, and with I forgot to mention that I've been doing all that cupping recently too.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and the cupping and the just sort of the cupping is where I can see my intuition grow from like point A to Z very specifically because my hands have become like little eyes, you know?
Mm.
Like they have developed their own sense of intuition that is so unrelated to my mind, you know?
Yeah.
I can just like the feeling sense has strengthened in my hands so much, and that I find that really cool, and like my hands have gotten so much stronger, and I don't even really like, I mean, I know I have the scientific background, right? Like I know that where the energy lines are on the back and which points are about where on in people's backs that relate to the different meridians, but like my hands just sort of like do the work in the
Mm.
sessions.
So, in terms of like from the if someone never heard of cupping before,
Mhm.
would you like explain? Because obviously it's the, you mentioned the back and the energy lines. So like if
Yeah.
someone's like, "Hey, I've never heard of cupping, but I'm curious. What is that? Like, how would you?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cupping is a tool in the traditional Chinese medicine landscape that, goes along with acupuncture, gua sha, and trigger point therapy or acupressure. There's basically energy highways, as I like to think of them, meridian lines that run all throughout our body from our toes to our head, and they relate to the different organs. And the organs are also related to the different spirits, and they have um, emotional and psychological and even physical associations with each organ. So you put the cups on the meridian points, which are along the meridian pathways, and then you use air or fire to suction up the skin into the cup, and then it pulls the blood to the surface, and it can help with muscle tension, relaxation, just stagnation and blockages that come up in those highways. It helps promote the smooth flow of chi, which is like energy or prana, life force, whatever you want to call it. In the traditional Chinese medicine lineage, they call it chi. Um, Helps the smooth flow of chi, rebalancing, and it feels really good and it's relaxing. And it's kind of similar to breath work. I think people come in, you know, the the feeling of me pressing on their meridian points is relaxing and nice, and then the cups go on and it's a weird sensation, and then they just have to like relax into it, and it only is 30 minutes, and then I take them off. And then there's some bruising, and the bruising gives us information about like maybe the different levels of stagnation or toxicity in the body.
That's interesting. Does it bruise more if there's more stagnation or toxicity, or less, or
Yeah,
how
the
does that work?
toxicity marks look different than just general stagnation. Toxicity is like little like blood dots, and then the stagnation is just like darker bruising or more inflammation.
That's so interesting.
Hmm.
Like how the body will just do stuff like that and give you
Yeah,
clues.
yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's like that the art and the science of it. Like there's
Hmm.
general things that you can see, but like you're saying, so you feel like, well, it's interesting too, right? So you're talking about the development of intuition, and I mentioned nature, and then you're talking about this direct human connection to people's working with the energy through someone's back with the cupping.
Hmm.
Um, and really, it's just like working with things that are that have energy in them, and just
Yeah.
sensitive to the energy in them, and trusting, giving yourself permission to trust it, right? I mean, it sounds like,
Hmm.
or yeah.
Hmm.
So do you find that like so what would be interesting, I would think, with the cupping is like, if you are feeling a certain way about the movement of someone's energy, do you get kind of confirmation, like, I have an intuition about this, and then you might get confirmation from noticing how they bruise or something? Does that ever happen?
Yeah. And a lot of people come in with the same things. Like everyone in New York City comes in with tension in their shoulders and their traps from like looking at their phones and like being stressed up here and not, not relaxing.
Hmm.
And then I always see the kidney meridians sort of respond. And that would indicate to me that just people are walking around really, really exhausted, really burnt out, really overstimulated,
Hmm.
and are really seeking just deep rest. And I like to think of this metaphor that my acupuncture teacher, actually, I don't, he gave me a different metaphor, but this is the one that lands for me,
Hmm.
is like a swan who's just like, they look like they've got it all together. They're gliding along the surface. And then below the water, like they're scrambling, kicking so hard to stay afloat.
Yeah.
And I think that's how a lot of people are operating day to day. Like they look like they have it all together. I mean, I relate to this. I think that's what my acupuncturist said to me first time I came in. Excuse me, is that I look really sort of calm and put together and controlled, and then underneath the surface, like it's a mess. I'm
Hmm.
fighting to stay afloat.
Yeah. And so you feel like some of this is a bit more so in the city, like a city energy versus
Yeah, I
urban, or
guess I can only speak to the city because I'm here in New York, but I have a feeling that it's everywhere. I see it with my mom. I see it with um, friends in other places.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's the biggest gift of all of these practices is creating a space where people can be how they actually are. Like they don't have to
Yeah.
they can in like so to stick with your metaphor, like we can all think of ourselves like you are a swan. Just because you're
Hmm.
paddling so fast underneath the water doesn't mean you're not graceful and all those things. It's things that there's this
Yeah.
aspect that's moving. And so, what's so great about these practices is you don't have to pretend like the feet aren't scrambling under the water. It gives you a
Hmm.
chance to like embrace that that is happening. You mentioned Carl Jung earlier, and I always,
Hmm.
always often say in breathwork sessions and elsewhere, what we resist persists.
Yes.
And I'm sure a lot of people have said that, but I first heard it as a Carl Jung quote. And so
Hmm.
if we're trying to pretend like our feet aren't scrambling under the water, the cycle just continues and there's nowhere for that energy to go. But ironically, as soon as we embrace that that's happening, it gives it space to move. And so all these
Hmm.
practices that you're engaged with and that you're doing and that the world that we're in, that's my favorite part about it is it creates a space of authenticity on a different level that you don't always get other aspects of the world in your life.
Yeah. I think for so long, I guess, like, if I'm trying to think of a specific example, like, I think for so long, I really resisted the fact that I was angry at all, that I
Mm.
had any kind of anger or that that was an emotion I felt, or it was so inaccessible to me. I remember, like, thinking I just skip anger, I go right to sadness. Like, I'm not angry. What? And that's, of course, I'm angry, like, for so many reasons about different things. Um, and I love that all these practices and tools makes me more conscious and aware, and I get to be a witness to my life and the things around me,
Mm.
and I'm not like asleep. I
Yeah.
remember leaving my teacher training, the first one, the 200-hour, where I was just everything was exploding for the first time and it was very overwhelming. And I remember walking home and seeing this girl smashing her leg into a wall, like screaming and hitting the door. She wanted to get in at the bus stop as I was walking to the train. And she was the the very like outward expression of anger, and maybe there's also like a gendered aspect of it as well, like made me deeply uncomfortable. I was
Mm.
like, oh, that is really feels really uncomfortable for me. Like I don't like seeing that,
Mm.
and then whatever, I forget it, but I noticed it. I downloaded. I realized that was happening. That I was feeling so uncomfortable seeing this person be really angry, and then um I did Rose Aaron's training a year later, and the liver part got really black, and she was like, "Are you really angry?" And I was like, "No,
Mm-hmm.
no."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Okay." And then in David's training, when he has us scream, I remember feeling like those screams. I was like screaming into a black hole of oblivion, and it felt so good. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm angry. Like I can access anger. It's a feeling. It's not bad." I like when he says, I listen to his tapes a lot, so I like when he says that anger mixed with a little love is inspiration or creativity or something like that.
Mm.
And that anger and uh that emotion can be such a fueling force for creativity or change in our lives and other people's when it's dealt with. And I love that like we have like we're creating containers and like participating in spaces where that like that emotion is not repressed but expressed
Yeah,
in a safe and healthy way.
for sure.
I don't know where I was going with this. Also, is it okay if I drink coffee? Is that sound gonna be annoying?
No, take a sip. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
If it's annoying, who cares? Yeah, drink the coffee.
Sorry, listeners.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's interesting that you mention anger specifically because if even throughout all these years, like starting 20 years ago, 2003, so more than 20 years ago, 2003, 2004, when I started meditating, whatever. Anyway, so even throughout this whole journey, I carry a lot of anger as well. So it's funny you say the one, so I don't really know why, but things I've noticed in terms of
Like I don't know why. I have no idea. Sorry.
like, well, they certainly have ideas. No, I certainly have ideas. But what's so funny is like with all the work, it's like it's still bubbles, and it doesn't mean it doesn't go away. I mean, like the more it comes up, almost like that's the other thing. The more sometimes I find like when people start breathing, and if they start to feel overwhelmed or flooded with feeling, is because it's the first time we're allowing the door to open. So with these practices,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the first time I ever did a breathwork session, like really moving the breath the way that we guide, um, that was in 2013, the first time I experienced a breathwork session like that. Like I had done breathwork
Mm-hmm.
before, like more traditional pranayama yoga breathing
Yeah.
stuff. But the first time I did like a circling one was in 2013, where I was like really moving the air through. And
Mm-hmm.
I had so much rage. I had no idea was in there, all to the point that we're talking about, right? And so it is, you mentioned being gendered in the sense that, like, certainly in our culture, uh, it's more, I guess you would say, more acceptable for men to be angry.
Yeah.
Just broadly speaking, I don't know
Sure.
how you feel.
Stereotypically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like, you see it in movies, you see it in television, like whatever. Like men can get angry, women like it's like there's a cliche in acting where it's just like someone writes a script, the man gets angry, the woman cries. Like that's pretty much you know what I mean? And it's just like ridiculous, but it's like it's like programmed in even from the media that we consume. You
Yeah.
know? And so, but the thing is, even at that, even as a man, where it's like socially, quote unquote, more acceptable for me to theoretically be angry, the way I was raised and like different stuff, I didn't feel comfortable being angry to such a degree that I didn't even realize it was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I'm nice, I'm easygoing, I'm chill, like, but nah, whatever. And then I started breathing like that, and I started screaming. I even started screaming about specific things from high school that I didn't even know bothered me, and it was weird because I was like using articulated words to be like, I was saying, whatever. I was like saying very specific things. I was like, where is that coming from? Um, so, anyways, it's interesting that you mentioned anger, and the
Mm-hmm.
one other thing I want to say about it is what I've noticed through working with female clients, like over the time I've been doing this, is I've noticed that usually anger, I'm finding with the women that I work with especially, is underneath a blanket, a heavy, heavy blanket of sadness.
Mm-hmm.
So, like that, there's like a sort of when the breath starts, there will be sort of like a heavy, all I could describe is like a heavy lethargic feeling starts to come up.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought, oh, is this person breathing less now? Are they whatever? Like we talk about, this is one of the things that comes up. Like they'll be breathing, breathing, breathing. And then as soon as the energy starts to rise, I'll notice it start to like push up, like into the throat, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as energy starts to rise, I'll notice in a lot of cases, then like a heaviness, like again, like someone laid like a weighted blanket starts to push down, and I'd be like, what is that? What is that? And then as I got certain clients that I work with a lot, like frequently in one-on-ones, and I've gotten to know really well, I realized like through the time as the layers reveal themselves, there is rage, but it is so culturally conditioned to be repressed and pushed down that
Mm-hmm.
as rage starts to arise, the heaviness comes in because it's almost like so deeply ingrained that it's not allowed. So it like converts
Mm-hmm.
to a depression almost.
Mm-hmm.
you know?
It's so interesting.
Yeah, like I've once heard depression is rage turned inward. Have you ever heard that?
I think I have. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist or
Yeah.
anything like that, but I think it's interesting. And that's what I see like in a microcosm. Like I see the rage starts to come up, but then it gets turned inward and it becomes this heavy feeling. And it looks like sadness or it looks like a passive lethargic feeling, but it's actually like rage is just bubbling up and then it's getting pushed back in.
Yeah, and I think about the way that I sort of went about, like from childhood. I think I had a lot of rage for a period of time, and then it turned into depression in like later high school and college.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
And
think
then I became an alcoholic and I just started using drugs and alcohol to express, which really works for a while. And then it
hmm,
doesn't, you know.
in what way? So you would like drink to be more outward or like
Yeah.
interesting.
When I just used alcohol as like a solution to everything. And this is just on my mind because I have my sobriety anniversary on Saturday, which is exciting.
Good for you.
But
Yeah,
I've
that's
been
amazing.
thinking about it a lot.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I didn't even know that about you. Like,
Thank you.
and as much as I know you, I didn't even know that about you.
Yeah,
So,
I don't talk about it that much.
mm, so do you feel like it gave you a permission to express in some sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like I would just yeah, in all the ways, whether that was crying or yelling or talking to people I was afraid to talk to and
hmm
behaving free and goofy and silly and dancing. And it sounds like pretty typical stuff. Like that's kind of what a lot of everyone is drinking and using substances for, but it just got out of control and didn't work for me personally. But yeah.
I recently heard about this book that was talking about smoking cigarettes, and
Hmm.
it said like something about I haven't read the book yet, but I was thinking about getting it. There's someone that I know that has been smoking for a long time. They've been trying to quit forever, and I was like, oh, I want to get them this book because it sounds interesting. Because it takes the it's like well, like I got this sense that it was like why do you like it? Like there's so much energy put on it's bad, don't do it. It's bad, don't do it. But just I feel like it made sense to me in the sense that there's this what we resist persists, so
Yeah.
like around drinking or addiction, which we don't have to go down the rabbit hole with this, but I there's a lot in a certain section of my family. There's a long history of addiction, and
Hmm.
so there's a sense that if there's a sense that what we resist persists, if when we think of like alcohol, for instance, it's like if all we say is it's terrible, it's bad for you. Yes, like we all know that, right? To like drink too much is terrible. Being an alcoholic, that's awful. It sucks. Like nobody. So then what, but what's the good side of it? And
Yeah.
so what I mean by that is in this case, it's interesting because it gave you this ability to express emotions that were otherwise repressed. And
Yeah.
that's like literally what we do for breathwork. That is my
I
main
know.
breathwork to help people express and repress. So what's interesting about habits is like people talk about getting rid of habits, but the best way to get rid of a habit is to switch it out.
Yeah, to replace it.
Right. So if alcohol is the way that it's like, oh, this allows me to express and be free, like live freely or something, it's like,
Hmm.
well, is there a way to switch that out and replace it? In the breath, what's so amazing because I'm sure, plant medicine is like a whole other realm that
Hmm.
we would be able to talk about. But the idea that for people who are sober or who don't want to do plant medicine or whatever, because like there's no reason to have to do it. But the fact that
Yeah.
breath is there for us, it's completely natural. Like it involves no chemical input. Everything that happens in it shifting the brain physiology is all like would the word be endogenous? Like it lives in us already.
Hmm.
And so that's what's so incredible. I find like endlessly curious about and endlessly fascinated by is like our breath changes our brain state the way that alcohol would or the way that a plant medicine would. And I'm jumping all over the place here, but like the point being that the breath, our own breath, can give us that opportunity to express in liberation and freedom. And it's our own breath. There's no downside. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
exactly. It's so cool. It's been so helpful for me, especially at being sober. And I don't know, I was just talking to someone last weekend about how how like Ram Dass and Timothy Leary were like doing tons of like LSD and psychedelics And then Ram Dass went to India and he met with the gurus. And he brought, I don't know if he, I can't, I might be forgetting whether he brought the psychedelics to India or was asking the Indian gurus about it, but they were just like, we don't need that. Like, we have meditation and pranayama. Like, that shit is way wilder and crazier. And then he stopped doing the psychedelics and became Ram Dass, I guess, which I find really interesting. Even with the tumo breathing, like, same thing. I love and I'm not an expert in that style of breathing, Wim Hof or anything, but I love hearing the stories about them going into the Himalayas and into the caves and hearing these anecdotal stories about people stopping their heartbeats and reversing all kinds of, they were living to like outrageous years, over 100, and I love, like, the breath book is obviously incredible. But reading about how, like, there's these, like, the studies of the people who were given the E. coli, and the group that didn't do the Wim Hof suffer was got a fever, and then the group that was doing the Wim Hof didn't have any kind of reaction to the E. coli.
Yeah, like alkalizing the whole system almost, like very quickly.
Yeah. And David talks about alkalizing in his book too. I find it really helpful to go reread parts of that book because it touches on things that I don't remember from our training. But back to alcohol and drugs really quickly, like, that all that stuff made me feel really free, really expressive, really amazing, and it really, really works in the beginning. But then for me, it was like it became a prison. It wasn't something that helped me feel free because the come down and the after effects of the anxiety and the depression, it was making it all so much worse.
Right.
And then it just became like a cycle of like, I have to do this thing to be okay, and all the other stuff that comes with it, and like impacting relationships with others and stuff. And now now to some extent I do see how, like, my breathing and my pranayama and my meditation and yoga and taking care of myself with food and all that stuff is like a daily practice that I have to do to feel okay. And it, in the same way, like, it'll go, that those feelings of like feeling good and free will go away if I just abandon it all. But that's kind of like my path is like doing everything that makes me feel really good, feeling good, forgetting to do the things, and then feeling bad again, and then going back to do it.
Totally. I think that's like, I always think of it like a maintenance routine.
Yeah.
Like we brush our teeth every day.
Spiritual maintenance.
Or like we hope we brush, like I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you brush your teeth every day, and like, you take showers regularly. You eat food. Like you do certain things that are just maintenance routine. They're part of life. And so, whether that's a certain meditation practice or a breathwork practice or a yoga practice or all those things, like there's, whether you consider it more spiritual or not, or if it's just like just pure science, the science of it. Because again, if you breathe slow and deep, you're gonna feel calmer. Like just that's the simplest bullet point of breathing is like breathe slow and low, and you'll feel calmer. Right? Like, so even if it's just like touching on that, it's just it's maintenance. It's like spiritual, emotional maintenance, like you're saying. And so, and just to support your point, I am in no way saying, like, when I say like, look, like, what's the good thing about drinking? Right? Like, I'm not saying like, why is drinking good?
Oh, no, but there are.
What's the good thing that comes out of it? And then how do you achieve that good thing from something else that has no downside, like breath? And because again, when the emphasis is always on bad, shame, it, like the energy of pushing against it pushes back. Whereas if you say, oh, what's working about this? And then you shift it. I have found, like, in smaller ways to look, again, like observing things with certain family patterns. But it's that shift of just being like, oh, wait, we have, like you're saying, we have our breath and it has these profound effects. And it's fun because, again, there's no side to be like, oh, crap, I'm going to wake up in the morning and have a hangover, or like, I'm going to forget that I did this. Like, it was fun until this thing happened or whatever. Yeah. There's none of that with the breath. It's just like good community, good people. and then is good for your body, like your metabolic,
Yeah.
like all this stuff. So I mean, it's just all on the
Yeah.
side, which is so cool, and it's free. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah,
So
it's literally free.
yeah,
Wait, did you say metabolic health?
yeah. So so something again coming from the sciencey part, there's
Mhm.
this aspect of breath that you could get into where you just focus on essentially becoming more CO2 tolerant. So this would apply to
Mm.
like free divers who are trying to hold their breath for long periods of time. It applies to endurance athletes, like
Yeah.
triathlons or marathoners or swimmers or cyclists. And so when we do some of the more advanced, well, even simple, but certainly some of the more advanced pranayama yoga breathing techniques, like, yes, you're feeling calmer, you're feeling more centered in your body, but interestingly enough, your breath becomes more and more efficient. Like your body becomes more and more efficient at absorbing oxygen, because just because we're breathing in doesn't mean we're
Mhm.
efficiently absorbing all the oxygen we breathe in. Just because we're eating food, if our microbiome is off, it doesn't mean we're efficiently absorbing all the nutrients the way that we would be if our microbiome was more on point. So the breath can do that for us as well when we guide it in certain ways or certain patterns and with consistency over time, like that maintenance routine we were talking about.
Yeah. Everyone always says they're really hungry after my breathwork class.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. They're
Um,
like, I need to go eat a cheeseburger. I'm
that's
starving.
hilarious. That's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
last two things I want to ask about. Well, one is your wellness Substack. So you got a wellness, so
Oh,
you
yeah.
got cupping, you got breath work, you got this wellness Substack going. So what's that? You're just like writing articles on there. What's that about?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I guess it similar to like what we've been talking about, remembering. I like this theme of remembering
Mm,
and to sort of like the ice is thawing, that's been a huge part of my 20s or like the last like 3 years of my life, 3 or 4 years is just like melting away some of the ice that and it revealing things that I was interested in or enjoyed doing when I was younger and
mm,
whatnot. I was an English major and I have always loved writing and I had been journaling since I was however old you are in elementary school. Like I really remember like my first little journal I bought from the Scholastic Fair in elementary school and I still have it.
mm,
And I used to write every day and it was really, 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 really profound way. Like it was like practically the only tool I had to deal with my internal landscape as a child growing up. And then I was always better at English and literature and was an English major, like I just said, and then I just sort of forgot about it and was like, I have to get a real job and I have to make money and I have to like do like business and corporate and stuff like that. So I did that. And then in David's training, it really just sort of, well, and then my acupuncturist 2 years ago was like, you should write a blog. Like,
mm,
even if no one sees it, like, what if you just wrote every day? And I sort of wrote it off, let it go. Then in David's training, his emphasis on creativity really sparked an interest in me trying to write again. And now obviously Substack is so popular and like everyone has a Substack or whatever. But
mm,
I just I just started I just was I think that the tools just like they work. Like I had the confidence to just try and do it and not really care less about what other people think. So I started this wellness Substack called Wear a Helmet with my friend Lizzie, who we mentioned earlier.
mm.
And we were pretty ambitious about the cadence with which we would write every week, but turns out it's a little harder, like a rookie mistake. I was like, yeah, I'll write 2 articles every week.
Mm,
Um, but now I think it's like one a week and
yeah.
I've written things. I've written kind of an intro about myself and my personal journey with wellness and health and breath work. I've written about, I write about like wellness tools that work for me, whether they're like breath work or biennial beats or my immunity tincture I like to put in my water or the face mask that I just bought that I really like. So it's very fun. I
That's
did a writing class this fall too, which was amazing. Really, really. helpful. It felt really great and cathartic.
Awesome. Well, it's beautiful. That's a great point you make of coming back to things that excited you as a kid.
Mhm. Mhm.
It just makes perfect sense. Like it, going back into that, and again, it makes sense too. Like we were talking about before with playfulness, curiosity, exploration.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like bringing all that back in, that energy back in. So that makes
Yeah.
sense. That's beautiful. So how do people
Yeah.
find the wellness Substack? Say the name again.
It's called Wear a Helmet.
Wear a helmet. Yep.
Yeah, which we thought was funny because we really like e-biking.
Nice.
But obviously we don't wear helmets. So it's a little bit of uh, irony there. But also, I didn't know this, but in Australia, wear a helmet means wear a condom.
Oh, that's funny.
I know, but also a little embarrassing. But yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not that serious. I'm just like
Yeah.
trying to write, trying to share things. I've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from people, which makes me feel amazing.
Yeah.
I really encourage people to write if they like writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What should I write about next, Jon?
Well, well, I just want to say this stuff first, which is, there's a quote, an Anne Frank quote, which I don't remember the
Mhm.
quote exactly, but of all people, right? And this incredible, uh, young woman, she said something like she was writing in her diary and she said it's something along the lines of, I'm sure somebody out there knows this quote way better than I do, but she said something along the lines of like, I'm writing in this journal, who's ever going to read it?
Mhm.
And it's the diary of Anne Frank. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Mhm.
thank God she wrote in that journal. Oh my God. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like, so often it feels like as a person, like our need to create, like Rick Rubin talks about this stuff all the time. It's like create for the sake of creating, create because it's authentic to you, share,
Yeah.
I'm telling myself this all the time. Like, it's beautiful that you're on this journey and you're doing this. Um, so right about next, I don't know, dig into the anger. I mean, you've got so
Oh
many
yeah.
interesting things going on. So
Anger would be cool.
whatever feels like it's really on your heart, let it rip.
Yeah.
Right?
Anger.
Yeah. And then the last, well, actually, then I have one question for you. But the one thing I want to say is like, I can't wait to take a yoga class of yours
Oh, thank
because
you.
you've
That's
obviously
like the last frontier.
that's what I'm saying. It's like, but well, hey, another Carl Jung, the cave we fear to enter holds the treasure we seek. Yeah. So it's like you've done so much comprehensive, incredible training with so many amazing people in all
I
these
know.
spaces, but especially in the yoga space. So I'm like, I can't wait for you to have a yoga class. I will be there with bells on, as they say. So just let me know.
Yeah. I'm a perfectionist. I don't like to try to do things I think I'll be bad at or that
Mm.
don't come like easily to me.
Well, I'm gonna keep advocating for you to do a yoga
Thank
class.
you.
I will be there. And then, so last thing I want to ask, if you had a billboard and you could put one message on a billboard, just like any message on a billboard, what do you think it would be?
Eat your vegetables. I don't
Nice.
know.
Love it.
Or like, yeah, that's the billboard I need to repeat to myself every day. I need to put that in my kitchen.
Makes sense.
I hate them.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. What's your least favorite?
I don't know. They're like all bad. I mean, I like broccoli rabe,
Yeah.
and I hate salads, and I don't really cook, so it's hard for me to even like think about vegetables. Like I walk into the like section of the grocery store and I'm totally lost.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do I do with this? So I used to drink a lot of smoothies and that's where I would put my vegetables in them. But then as I've learned more about traditional Chinese medicine, I've shied away from eating cold foods because it's just like not really good for me or
Hmm.
if you or anyone if you think about it from that perspective.
Interesting.
I don't know that I find is the biggest divide, at least to my understanding, between the traditional Chinese and the Indian Hindu is like the Hindus are the Indian yoga lineage. They're all like talking about how raw veganism and
Hmm.
raw fruits and vegetables have the most prana and life force. So you want to ingest those. And then in the traditional Chinese medicine, they promote cooking your vegetables down and cooking things so that they're warmer and easier to digest.
Yeah.
You just have to find what works for you.
Totally. That's the wildness of it all. It's like all the things. Sometimes even like the suggestions are completely, they're not just a little different, they're opposites.
Yeah.
And you're like, so what the hell are we talking about here?
I know.
So it's interesting because I feel like it depends on phases. Because I find this with the breath work too, like in a microcosm, like for some people, a certain approach is the way to go. For other people, almost the opposite is the way to go to achieve a similar result, no less, you know? So that's a whole other,
I would also put where awareness goes, energy flows on a billboard. I think that was the first spiritual teaching I learned when I was in high school or like 17 or 18. I was really struggling and didn't have any kind of idea of what to do. And I just remember that. And honestly, like I really believe that like anything I want, I can get. Like anything I want will happen if it's meant to be and if I put the awareness and energy towards it. So it's pretty powerful.
Beautiful. And so where awareness goes, energy flows. And then do you have and we mentioned your Substack. Do you have an Instagram or somewhere you want to say that
Yeah,
you can find your stuff?
So my Instagram is at Alden Price, ALDEN PRICE, and that's probably the best way to stay on top of my breathwork classes and cupping and my Substack. It's all there.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for talking on here and everything.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining Mindfulness Unscripted. You could reach out anytime at jonorsini.com, JONORSINI, for free discovery calls, Zoom sessions, questions, reflections, comments, whatever you need. You can find me on Instagram at Jon Orsini, on YouTube at Mindfulness Unscripted, and on Spotify. See you next time.